Have you ever found yourself just wishing for a shortcut? You know, a way to grasp something really vast, really intricate, like the entire sweep of English literature, but without having to wade through stacks of dense textbooks or endless academic papers.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming.
Exactly. So imagine having that grand tapestry of human expression from its earliest sort of Anglo-Saxon whispers right up to its most mind-bending postmodern complexities, all laid out clearly for you.
In a way that's actually engaging, too.
Right. And maybe with some surprising insights thrown in. That's pretty much the adventure we're embarking on today.
Indeed. We're launching into what we call a deep dive into the chronicles of English literary periods. And this isn't just going to be, a list of names and dates.
Definitely not.
It's more a comprehensive journey through how English literature has fundamentally evolved over, more than 1,000 years.
Wow.
We'll be digging into the profound cultural shifts, the linguistic changes, the philosophical turns that haven't just shaped the stories and poems and plays. They've really ignited them.
Ignited. I like that. These are works that still resonate with us today, right? They challenge our perspectives, spark our imaginations.
Absolutely.
So our mission for you listening in is to give you a kind of indispensable roadmap, a genuine shortcut, hopefully, to navigating the major currents and the pivotal turning points in this incredible history.
We'll try to distill the most important nuggets of knowledge, maybe highlight some genuinely surprising facts you might not have come across before.
And help you connect the dots so you walk away not just, informed, but genuinely intrigued by this magnificent lineage of storytelling. It's truly striking when you see how, across centuries, the very nature of human expression just keeps
reinventing itself.
Relentlessly.
Yeah, relentlessly. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And as we trace that reinvention, you'll start to see patterns emerge, certain questions resurface, and human concerns echo across these vast stretches of time. It's quite something.
Okay, so where do we start? The very beginning. Let's begin at the bedrock. The Old English, or as it's often called, the Anglo-Saxon period. This roughly spans from the middle of the 5th century, say around 450 AD, right up to that really momentous year 1066.
The Norman Conquest year? Okay.
Exactly. So this is where the English literary tradition truly dawns. It's deeply rooted in those Germanic tribes, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, who settled in Britain after the Roman legions packed up and left around 410.
Right, leaving a bit of a vacuum.
A huge vacuum. This era is absolutely foundational. It sets the stage for everything that follows.
And the language itself? Old English? It's not like reading Shakespeare, is it?
Oh, not even close. It's crucial to grasp just how alien Old English sounds to our modern ears. It's a West Germanic language, vastly different from what we speak today. Phonetically, grammatically, it's actually far more akin to modern German.
Really? That's surprising.
Yeah, and the literature from this time, it was predominantly anonymous and deeply steeped in an oral tradition.
Meaning it was spoken, recited.
Spoken, chanted, sung, remembered. There was a powerful emphasis on epic poetry and heroic tales, designed to be recited often around, communal fires or in mead halls. Performance was key.
Okay, so if it sounds different, does it feel different too? What's the stylistic fingerprint of this early literature?
Definitely feels different. There are some truly distinctive characteristics. One of the most striking is something called alliterative verse.
Alliterative verse.
Right. The rhythmic power doesn't come from rhymes at the end of lines, like we often expect. Instead, it comes from repeating the initial sounds in words that are close together.
Like Peter Piper picked a peck.
Yeah.
But more epic.
Exactly, but woven into these grand narratives. It gave the poetry this powerful, almost percussive beat. Really helped make it memorable, impactful for oral delivery, easy to learn, easy to pass on.
Makes sense. And you mentioned vocabulary, too.
Yes. Beyond the sound, the vocabulary was also really distinct. They used what scholars call kennings.
Kennings. Okay, what are those?
They're not just poetic flourishes. They're these ingenious, compound metaphorical expressions, almost like miniature riddles woven right into the lines.
Can you give an example?
For sure. The classic one is calling the sea the whale road. Or a king might be a ring giver because he rewards his warriors with treasure.
Ah, okay, so it's descriptive, but more complex.
Exactly. It wasn't just descriptive. It was a testament to a worldview that saw poetic language as a way to encapsulate complex ideas in vivid, concrete imagery. Super important for a culture that relied so heavily on memory and oral transmission for its stories, its history.
And the themes, what were they writing about or reciting about?
The themes woven into this style are incredibly rich, and they often reflect the well, the turbulent societal shifts of the time. You find this consistent, sometimes quite uneasy blend of Christian and pagan influences throughout the literature.
Pagan and Christian at the same time.
Absolutely. It's a real mix. Core concepts like fate, they called it weird, W-Y-R-D, are central.
Fate?
Yeah, this sense of an inescapable destiny. Alongside that, you see themes of unwavering courage, especially in the face of impossible odds and absolute loyalty to one's lord. These were virtues essential for survival in a pretty harsh, uncertain world.
Warrior culture values, basically.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And much of the prose from this period also reflected these cultural pillars. We see predominantly religious texts, sermons, saints' lives, often aimed at guiding a population that was gradually converting to Christianity.
Right, the conversion process was happening then.
It was. And alongside those religious texts, you have historical accounts, like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, trying to record the reigns of kings, the significant battles, the events shaping their burgeoning kingdoms.
Okay, so if we had to pick one work, the absolute standout.
It has to be Beowulf, no question. It's the foundational epic poem, a masterpiece that encapsulates so much of the era.
The Monster Slayer.
That's the one. But it wasn't just Beowulf. We also have significant contributions from poets, like Caedmon, traditionally considered the first English poet whose name we actually know. He was famed for his Christian hymns.
Caedmon.
And Cynewulf, another pivotal poet. We know his name because he actually signed his works using runic letters woven into the poems themselves. His work beautifully merges those older Germanic poetic forms with really deep Christian theology.
So they show that transition happening.
Precisely. Their existence, alongside Beowulf, proves this wasn't just a primitive beginning. It was a developing, burgeoning literary tradition, even back then.
Okay, you mentioned digging deeper. Cults, conquests, and cultural collision. Sounds dramatic.
Well, it was. To really get the Old English period, you have to grapple with these fundamental forces. The pagan underpinnings are profoundly important. These Germanic tribes brought with them a polytheistic belief system. They worship deities like Woden.
Who we know as Odin?
Exactly. And Thunor. Right. These beliefs weren't just, folklore tucked away. They actively reinforced core societal values. That unyielding grip of fate, word, the absolute necessity of courage in battle, and this almost sacred loyalty within the warrior culture. A man's honor was inextricably tied to his lord.
And the king himself had a special role.
Hugely special. Central to this ethos was what scholars call the cult of kingship. The king wasn't just a political leader. He held a sacred, almost divinely descended role.
Like a god king.
Almost. He was the protector, the generous gift giver, the ring giver, kenning, rewarding loyal warriors. He was the very symbol of the tribe's strength and prosperity. It wasn't just about power. It was about cosmic order, with the king linking the earthly realm to the divine.
Wow. So how did Christianity fit into that? Must have been a clash.
A massive clash, but also a slow intertwining. The really dramatic shift began with St. Augustine's mission, sent by the Pope, arriving in Kent to 597 AD. Right, and this wasn't an overnight conversion. Think of it as a gradual, persistent process, sometimes looking forward, sometimes stalled, that slowly but surely brought Christianity to the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in Britain.
And this changed the culture.
Fundamentally. The introduction of Christianity meant a whole new set of cultural norms, beliefs, rituals began to weave themselves into and sometimes actively replace the old pagan ways. Suddenly, the cult of saints became widespread.
Praying to saints. Relics.
Exactly. The veneration of relics, believing they held miraculous powers, offering promises of cures, divine intervention, a direct spiritual connection. This profoundly shifted the literary focus too. From purely heroic sagas, you start seeing more hagiographies.
It's like life sayings.
Right, and crucial biblical translations which became vital tools for spiritual instruction and solidifying the new faith.
So back to Beowulf then. How does it fit? It sounds pretty pagan, with monsters and heroes.
It's a perfect example of this blend. It's truly remarkable. Beowulf, a poem that so vividly celebrates pagan heroic traditions, vengeance, earthly glory, physical strength, was actually written down, preserved, by Christian monks.
So they edited it, changed things.
Less edited, perhaps, and more. Reinterpreted. They subtly yet significantly wove in Christian morality and concepts of divine providence. They might reinterpret pagan concepts of fate, weird, through a lens of God's ultimate will.
Okay, so it's not just pagan or Christian, but both layered together.
Precisely. This blend isn't accidental. It's a living testament to the transitional nature of the era. You see two profound belief systems wrestling, merging, shaping the soul of this nascent English nation.
And this whole process started with an invitation. That seems unlikely.
It does sound odd, doesn't it? But that's the traditional account, largely thanks to the Venerable Bede. His Ecclesiastical History of the English People, written around 731, is our main source here.
Bede, okay, what did he say happened?
He tells us that the native Romano-Britons, the people living in Britain after the Romans left in 410, were left utterly vulnerable. They were being constantly hammered by raids from the Picts and Scots coming down from the north.
So they needed protection.
Desperately. According to Bede, a British king, traditionally named Vortigern, made a truly fateful decision. He invited these Germanic tribes, Angles, Saxons, Jutes, to come to Britain, but not as invaders.
As mercenaries, bodyguards.
Exactly. As mercenaries to defend against these northern raiders. This invitation was a total gamble, a frantic measure to fill the huge military and political vacuum left by Rome. They basically offered them land in exchange for military service.
Sounds like a deal that could go wrong.
And it did, spectacularly. As history often teaches us, such invitations can quickly spiral. After dealing with the Picts and Scots, the Germanic mercenaries looked around, saw fertile, relatively undefended land.
And thought, why work for them when we can take it?
Pretty much. They turned on their British employers. And this wasn't just opportunistic. It kicked off a continuous migration. More of their kin sailed over from mainland Europe, swelling their numbers, consolidating their grip on the land.
So it became a full-blown conquest.
Yes, leading to a long, brutal period of conflict and significant cultural displacement. The native Britons were systematically pushed west into the fringes areas that would become modern-day Wales and Cornwall.
Or they fled.
Many did, yeah. Fled across the Channel to what's now Brittany in France. It was a huge, often devastating cultural upheaval. The invading tribes then carved out their own independent kingdoms: Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia.
The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms we learn about.
Those are the ones. Constantly vying for dominance, some powerful kings, known as Bretwaldas, managed to achieve temporary supremacy over the others, sort of high king status.
And crucially, this wasn't just about land and power.
No, it was a massive linguistic and cultural transformation. Old English, the West Germanic language these settlers brought, inexorably became the dominant language. It gradually replaced the Celtic languages and the Latin that the Romano-Britons had spoken.
Language shift is huge.
Absolutely pivotal. This linguistic shift was crucial in forming the English identity we recognize today. That, alongside the eventual, sometimes patchy conversion of these kingdoms to Christianity, profoundly impacted everything: society, law, and of course, literature.
It really makes you pause, doesn't it? If language is so fundamental to culture, this period represents an entire culture being, well, forcibly redefined. What happens to the collective memory, the folklore, the very soul of a people when their tongue is replaced?
It's a powerful question. And it hangs over this whole period. It also really sets the stage perfectly for what happens next.
Because the language changes again.
Drastically. Because if language defines a culture, then the next period we're diving into represents another complete redefinition for England. Moving on from that foundational era, we step into the Middle English period. This runs from that key date, 1066, up to around 1500.
Okay, 1066 to 1500, Middle English.
And this period, as you hinted, doesn't just begin. It explodes into being with one of the most pivotal events in all of English history: the Norman Conquest.
Hastings, William the Conqueror.
That's the one. His victory wasn't just a change of rulers on the throne. It fundamentally, irrevocably altered England's social fabric, its political structure, and critically, its language. This event gave rise to this new iteration: Middle English.
So a linguistic and cultural revolution.
Absolutely. Unlike almost any other in English history, for the better part of 3 centuries after 1066, England effectively became a trilingual nation.
Trilingual. What were the three?
You had Latin, still the language of the church, of scholars, of formal record-keeping. Then you had Norman French, which became the language of the new elite, the court, the law, administration, spoken by the conquerors.
Then English.
English was still spoken by the vast majority of the population, the common people, but it was largely relegated, seen as the language of the conquered, not the language of power or prestige.
It must have created some real social tension.
Immense tension, but also, fascinatingly, immense linguistic enrichment. This stratification led to a massive influx of French words into the English language. Its vocabulary just exploded.
Examples.
Oh, thousands. Think about words related to law: jury, justice, judge, attorney, parliament, government, crown, state, realm, tax, govern. Even food. The Anglo-Saxons raised the animals, pig, cow, sheep, but the Normans ate the meat. Pork, beef, mutton.
Ah, the famous example.
It's a classic. It wasn't just new words. It brought in new concepts, new social structures, new ways of thinking, all layering onto that existing Germanic base of Old English.
But didn't Old English have really complicated grammar? What happened to that?
That's the truly fascinating part. Old English grammar was complex, with lots of inflections, word endings indicating case, gender, number. But when Norman French became the language of the elite, English was effectively cut off from its aristocratic patronage, from the scriptoriums and formal education.
So it's simplified.
Exactly, out of necessity perhaps. Spoken by common people, mixing with Norse influences from Viking settlements too, it began to shed those complex grammatical structures. Word endings leveled out, syntax became more reliant on word order. It was a crucial, almost accidental step towards the more flexible grammar of modern English.
Accidental simplification. And the Normans brought new stories too, new ideas.
Completely new literary traditions and ideals. Most notably the concepts of chivalry and courtly love. These largely replaced the starker, heroic, often fatalistic style of Old English literature. Think knights in shining armor, quests, damsels in distress.
The whole Arthurian vibe.
Precisely. That really takes off in this period. Which brings us to the key characteristics of Middle English literature. It vividly reflects this cultural revolution. We see the dramatic rise of the romance.
Romance as in love stories.
Sometimes, but primarily romance as in adventure stories. These were French-inspired narrative poems that just captivated audiences. Tales of adventure, chivalry, knights performing heroic deeds, often for the love of a noble lady. Arthurian legends, tales of knights errant, hugely popular, shaped centuries of fantasy.
And you mentioned Sir Gawain and the Green Knight earlier.
Yes. It's such a unique work from this time. It stands out because it masterfully blends the Old English alliterative verse, that rhythmic initial sound emphasis we talked about, with these brand new chivalric themes of courtly behavior, temptation, and honor.
So it's like a bridge between the two worlds.
Perfectly put. It feels both ancient and refreshingly new. A real bridge.
But were things still anonymous, like in Old English?
Many early works were, yes. Especially those circulating among the common people, maybe in English rather than French. They were often treated almost as communal property, constantly adapted and retold by performers, minstrels.
So the oral tradition continued.
It did, alongside written texts. This ongoing oral tradition meant the continued use of things like mnemonic devices, formulaic phrases, stock phrases, all designed to help performers remember and recite these long tales and maybe even improvise a bit.
And the church, still a big influence.
Oh, immense. The Catholic Church was omnipresent, influencing every aspect of life, including literature. You see this in the flourishing of specific genres, like mystery plays.
What were those?
Vivid dramatizations of biblical stories, the creation, Noah's Ark, the Nativity, the crucifixion, often performed by town guilds on pageant wagons in the streets during religious festivals, bringing sacred history alive for a largely illiterate population.
Like street theater, but religious.
Exactly. Then you had morality plays. These were powerful allegorical dramas. The most famous is Everyman.
Everyman, I've heard of that.
Right. Characters weren't specific people, but personified abstract concepts. Good deeds, knowledge, beauty, strength. They battled for the soul of the central character, teaching clear moral lessons about salvation and the path to heaven.
Very direct teaching.
Very. And religious prose also flourish. Mystical texts, like those by Julian of Norwich, offer these incredibly profound personal spiritual insights into divine love, suffering, and the human condition. She's a remarkable early female voice in English literature.
So religion and romance. Anything else starting to emerge?
Yes. Towards the later part of the period, something really important happens. As Norman influence gradually waned, as English began to reassert itself in government and law, and as the different social classes started interacting more, a new focus on realism and social critique emerged.
People started writing about real life.
More so, yes, and critiquing it. Authors like William Langland, and especially Geoffrey Chaucer, began offering incredibly sharp commentary on contemporary society, its hypocrisy, its social injustices, the vibrant, often flawed complexities of everyday medieval life.
Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales.
We've arrived at the age of Chaucer. He's often called the father of English literature, for very good reason. Chaucer, living roughly 1343 to 1400, was absolutely instrumental in legitimizing English.
Making it okay to write serious stuff in English.
Precisely. Proving its capacity for sophistication, nuance, humor, pathos. by choosing to write his masterpiece, The Canterbury Tales, in the East Midland dialect, the dialect spoken in London, the center of power and commerce. He didn't just help standardize what would eventually become modern English.
He showed what it could do.
He showcased its incredible potential. He demonstrated it was a language fit for serious, complex, and endlessly entertaining literature.
And the tales themselves are amazing, right? All those different characters.
Incredible. It's this sprawling, vibrant work. A vivid, humorous, often very satirical snapshot of medieval society told through the diverse voices of pilgrims traveling together to Canterbury Cathedral.
From knights to millers.
Exactly. From the noble knight to the famously bawdy wife of Bath, the utterly hypocritical pardoner to the genuinely good parson. Chaucer captures the entire social spectrum with astonishing psychological depth and often biting wit. His genius is giving each character such a distinctive voice, making the whole pilgrimage a microcosm of human experience. He brings the era alive.
Were there other big works alongside Chaucer?
Definitely. They help solidify English as a literary powerhouse. You have Piers Plowman by William Langland. It's a powerful, complex, dream vision poem offering a really searing critique of social and church corruption. It challenges the conscience of its readers.
So more social commentary.
Very much so. And then there's Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur. This was huge. It's a comprehensive prose compilation of the Arthurian legends. Malory gathered various French and English sources and wove them together into the definitive version of the Arthurian cycle in English.
King Arthur, Camelot, the Knights of the Round Table.
All of it. Malory's version became the primary source, shaping how generations right up to today would envision King Arthur and his world.
Okay, so as the medieval centuries draw to a close, what's next? Sounds like things are changing fast.
Incredibly fast. A new spirit began to stir across Europe, a kind of fervent rediscovery of ancient wisdom from Greece and Rome that would ignite this massive cultural explosion. We now turn to the next colossal period, the Renaissance.
The rebirth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes called the early modern period. It truly blossomed from around 1500 up to about 1660. And Renaissance really does mean rebirth. It was a time of immense intellectual and cultural transformation.
How so? What was being reborn?
Primarily a passionate, renewed interest in classical learning, the art, literature, philosophy of ancient Greece and Rome. This came alongside a philosophy called humanism, which had fundamentally challenged the older, more dogmatic medieval religious worldview.
Humanism, focusing on humans.
In essence, yes.
Yeah.
It emphasized human value, potential, and achievement in this world, rather than solely focusing on the afterlife. It advocated for the Studia Humanitatis.
Studies of humanity.
Right. A curriculum focused on grammar, rhetoric, history, poetry, moral philosophy subjects believed to cultivate well-rounded, articulate, virtuous individuals capable of engaging with the world. It marked a shift from a purely spiritual focus to embracing human experience, reason, and creativity.
And this period is so rich, you said it's often subdivided.
Yes, often into distinct ages, named after the reigning monarchs because the political climate heavily influenced the arts. But before we get to those, there's another huge force we need to consider, alongside humanism.
What's that?
The Reformation.
Ah, Martin Luther splitting the church.
Exactly. Luther's protests, starting in 1517, ignited a major schism in European Christianity. And in England, this played out dramatically, with Henry VIII breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church in the 1530s.
To get a divorce, right?
Largely, yes. Political and personal reasons. But establishing the Church of England, the Anglican Church, sparked decades of intense theological debate about faith, about the individual's right to interpret the Bible, about spiritual authority. This fueled a vibrant, often highly charged body of religious prose, pamphlets, translations, fierce arguments in print.
So you have humanism looking back to the classics and the Reformation arguing about God. Seems like they'd pull in different directions.
You'd think so. But what's truly remarkable is how these humanism encouraging intellectual exploration and the Reformation fostering debate and individual conscience somehow converged. They combined to spark this incredible explosion of creativity, intellectual freedom, and artistic innovation. It's fascinating.
Okay, so let's break down those subperiods. Where do we start?
Let's start with the Elizabethan age, 1558 to 1603, Queen Elizabeth I's long reign. This is widely, and rightly, considered the absolute golden age of English drama.
Shakespeare's time.
The peak of Shakespeare. The era was marked by a burgeoning sense of English nationalism, especially after defeating the Spanish Armada, and a thriving, incredibly popular public theater scene. Playhouses like the Globe were booming.
Right, and Shakespeare didn't just write plays.
He revolutionized drama itself. His profound tragedies like Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, they delve into the deepest psychological complexities of human nature like never before. His intricate comedies, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Twelfth Night, explore love, illusion, identity with dazzling wit. And his history plays gave England a powerful narrative of its own past.
Were there other big playwrights then?
Oh yes. Christopher Marlowe was a huge figure, a contemporary, maybe even a rival of Shakespeare. He perfected blank verse, that unrhymed iambic pentameter, and created these powerful, often rebellious, tragic heroes. Think of Dr. Faustus selling his soul for knowledge and power, and Ben Jonson. He was renowned for his sharp satirical comedies of humors, like Volpone or The Alchemist. He skillfully exposed greed, folly, and hypocrisy in London society based on the idea that personality was governed by bodily fluids or humors.
Okay, so drama was huge. What about poetry?
Also a brilliant flowering, particularly lyric poetry and especially the sonnet sequence. Poets were exploring love, beauty, time, mortality in these intricate 14-line poems.
Yeah.
Sir Philip Sidney's Astrophil and Stella is a masterful example, charting the ups and downs of unrequited love.
And Spenser.
Edmund Spenser's epic poem, The Faerie Queene. Though he never finished it, it's a monumental allegorical work, celebrating Elizabethan ideals of virtue, chivalry, holiness, all wrapped in gorgeous, complex poetry. It really showcases the artistic ambition of the age.
Okay, so Elizabeth dies in 1603. What happens next?
King James I of Scotland takes the throne, becoming James I of England. And this ushers in the Jacobean age from 1603 to 1625.
Jacobean from Jacobus, the Latin for James.
Exactly. And with the new monarch, the tone in literature perceptibly shifts. It becomes more cynical, more introspective. There's a greater focus on darker themes: social corruption, political intrigue, moral decay, a sense of unease, perhaps.
So less optimistic than the Elizabethan era.
Generally, yes.
Right.
Shakespeare was still writing, and in this period, he produced some of his darkest, most psychologically piercing tragedies: King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra. They really reflect this growing disillusionment, this exploration of the darker side of power and human nature.
And you mentioned revenge tragedy earlier.
Yes, that became really popular in the Jacobean period. Plays often pushed audiences to confront the most brutal aspects of human nature and societal decay through shocking stories of moral corruption, betrayal, and violent retribution. John Webster's The Duchess of Malfi is a prime example, a stark, brutal world of ambition and treachery. Chilling stuff.
Sounds intense. Anything else distinctive about Jacobean literature?
Absolutely. This era saw the rise of the metaphysical poets.
Metaphysical, like philosophical.
Yes, but in a very particular way. Led by the incredible John Donne. Their poetry was characterized by intricate intellectual arguments, highly unconventional and often startling metaphors called conceits, and a unique blend of secular passion and profound religious searching.
Conceits, like fancy ideas.
Sort of, but more like extended, surprising comparisons. Imagine Donne comparing two lovers' souls to the legs of a geometer's compass in A Valediction, forbidding mourning. One stays fixed while the other roams, but they remain connected. It's witty, intellectual, emotionally complex, forcing you to see connections you wouldn't expect.
Wow. Okay, so that's Donne and the metaphysicals. What comes after James I?
His son, Charles I. Which brings us to the Caroline Age, 1625 to 1649, named after Carolus, Latin for Charles.
Caroline, got it.
This was a shorter period, but intensely fraught, marked by rapidly rising political and religious tensions between the king and parliament, tensions that would eventually explode into the English Civil War.
So the literature reflects this tension.
It does, but in different ways. We see the emergence of the Cavalier poets. These were generally royalists, supporters of the king, like Ben Jonson, who bridges the eras, Robert Herrick, Richard Lovelace.
Cavaliers, like the king's supporters in the war.
Exactly. And their poetry, often in direct contrast to the intellectual density and spiritual angst of the metaphysical poets, celebrated courtly life, love, beauty, honor, and loyalty to the king. It tends to be light, elegant, polished verse. Think Herrick's "Gather ye rosebuds while you may, a carpe diem, seize the day," philosophy.
Enjoying life before the storm breaks.
Very much that feeling. A kind of defiant celebration of grace and pleasure in a world teetering on the brink of chaos.
And then the storm does break, the Civil War happens, the king is executed.
Which leads us to the final phase of this period, the Commonwealth period, or the Puritan interregnum from 1649 to 1660.
Interregnum, the time between kings.
Precisely. With the monarchy abolished, Oliver Cromwell and the Puritan government took charge. Known for their austere religious views and strict moral codes, one of their significant acts culturally was to close all public playhouses in 1642, and they remained closed throughout this period.
No more plays. A big blow to drama.
Huge. Dramatic production essentially stopped. Literature during this turbulent decade was largely political pamphlets, treatises arguing different sides, and religious, reflecting the fervent debates and moral earnestness of the Puritans.
But was there any major literary figure?
One towers above all others. John Milton.
Milton. Paradise Lost.
Exactly. A staunch Puritan and supporter of the Commonwealth, Milton found his political ideals shattered by the eventual failure of the Republic. Blind and disillusioned, he turned to poetry and began his epic masterpiece, Paradise Lost.
Written during this period.
Begun during this period, though published later, after the monarchy was restored. It's a monumental work, a true culmination of Renaissance learning, classical epic tradition, and Puritan theology. It explores vast themes: free will, rebellion against divine authority, the nature of good and evil, sin, redemption. A profound commentary on the human condition, framed by the biblical story of the fall.
Wow. Quite an end to the Renaissance period.
A truly epic conclusion. And it sets the stage for a reaction, a desire for order after all that upheaval.
Which brings us to
the Neoclassical period, also known perhaps more broadly as the Age of Reason or the Enlightenment. This stretches from the restoration of the monarchy in 1660 right up to about 1785.
New classical. So back to Greece and Rome again.
Very much so. This period was a direct, conscious reaction against what was perceived as the emotionalism, the religious fanaticism, the disorder, the sheer chaos of the preceding decades, the Civil War, the interregnum.
They wanted calm and order.
Exactly. This era valued order, logic, reason, clarity, elegance, and wit above all else. Writers consciously looked back to and drew inspiration from the perceived perfection, balance, and rationality of the classical literature of ancient Greece and Rome.
So what defines the literature of this Age of Reason?
Several key things. First, an enormous emphasis on reason and logic. Reason was seen as the primary source of authority, the best guide for human conduct and understanding. Literature, therefore, wasn't just for entertainment or self-expression.
It had a job to do.
It did. It was meant to instruct, to moralize, to improve society by exposing human folly, correcting errors in judgment, and championing rational thought. Clarity, restraint, and decorum were prized artistic virtues.
How did they expose folly? Sounds like satire might be important.
Hugely important. Satire and wit became incredibly powerful, precise tools. Writers used them with surgical skill to critique social manners, political corruption, human vanity, pride, and irrationality. They wielded sharp wit and a polished, elegant style, often with a kind of detached, ironic observer's perspective. The belief was that laughter, or at least pointed observation, could be a potent agent for social correction.
And they were deliberately copying the ancients.
Very consciously. Their reverence for the past wasn't just aesthetic, it was a philosophical choice. This led to a clear imitation of the classics. Authors emulated Roman writers like Horace, master of satire and odes, Virgil, epic poetry, and Cicero, rhetoric, embracing established genres like the formal satire, the ode, the epistle, even mock epic poems.
Mock epic? Like making fun of epics?
Sort of. Applying the grand, lofty style of classical epics to trivial subjects to highlight their absurdity. We'll see a great example soon. They also adhered to strict forms and metrical patterns, especially the heroic couplet.
That's the rhyming pair of lines.
Right, rhyming pairs of lines in iambic pentameter. They believed that discipline, structure, following classical rules would lead to timeless beauty and universal truth, mirroring the order they sought in society and thought.
But wasn't this also the time the novel started to emerge? That seems less classical.
It absolutely was. And that's one of the fascinating tensions of the period. Despite all the classical leanings, this era saw the undeniable rise of the novel as a dominant literary form.
Why then?
Several reasons. A growing middle class with more literacy and leisure time, improvements in printing technology making books cheaper. And this new audience craved stories that reflected their own experiences, their world, their moral dilemmas, their aspirations for social mobility. These early novels often focus on realistic characters, contemporary settings, and everyday life. It marked a huge shift from the aristocratic or highly allegorical literature of earlier periods. A true literary revolution for the common reader.
Okay, so like the Renaissance, this period gets broken down too.
Yes, usually into three distinct phases, each with its own particular flavor of reason and wit. First up is the Restoration, running from 1660 to about 1700.
The Restoration of the King, Charles II.
Exactly. And crucially for literature, the restoration of the theaters. After nearly 2 decades of being closed by the Puritans, the playhouses reopened, sparking a whole new kind of drama.
What kind was that?
Primarily, the vibrant, often quite scandalous Restoration comedy, also known as the comedy of manners.
Comedy of manners, what does that mean?
These plays brilliantly satirize the social codes, witty conversations, intricate intrigues, and often morally dubious romantic and sexual exploits of the upper classes, particularly the London elite. Think sharp dialogue, plots revolving around seduction, reputation, marriage for money.
Sounds quite cynical.
Often very cynical, but also incredibly witty. Playwrights like William Wycherley with his notoriously bawdy The Country Wife, and William Congreve, whose The Way of the World is considered a masterpiece of verbal dexterity, captured this world perfectly. Wit and reputation were everything, and hypocrisy was always the main target.
Any big names besides playwrights in the Restoration?
The towering figure is John Dryden. He was hugely influential poet, dramatist, translator, and formidable literary critic. He really set the tone for the era.
What do you do?
He excelled in multiple genres, but he famously perfected the heroic couplet. He made it the standard vehicle for serious poetry, for satire, translation, philosophical arguments, political commentary. His precise, balanced, elegant couplets became the model that writers would emulate for decades. He shaped the literary landscape.
Okay, so after Dryden and the Restoration comedies...
We move into the Augustan Age, roughly 1700 to about 1745.
Augustan, like Emperor Augustus in Rome.
Precisely. His reign was seen as the golden age of Latin literature, with writers like Virgil, Horace, and Ovid. English writers in the early 18th century consciously sought to emulate that achievement, aiming for similar levels of polish, wit, and moral seriousness in English. They saw themselves as creating a comparable classical age.
And who are the stars of this English Augustan age?
The undisputed titans were Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift, two absolute giants of satire.
Pope and Swift. Okay, tell me about Pope first.
Alexander Pope was a master technician, perhaps the most skillful ever, of the heroic couplet. He used it with incredible precision and wit for various purposes. He wrote brilliant mock-epic satires, most famously The Rape of the Lock.
The one about stolen hair?
That's it. Hilariously lampooning the trivial quarrels and vanities of aristocratic society by treating a stolen lock of hair with the grand, epic seriousness of the Trojan War. He also wrote profound philosophical poetry in couplets like An Essay on Man, reflecting on human nature, our place in the universe, the great chain of being. Polished, aphoristic, highly quotable.
And Swift, he was different.
Very different in tone, though also a master satirist. Jonathan Swift was the master of savage, biting satire. Where Pope might use a rapier, Swift often used a bludgeon, but with incredible intellectual force. His works expose human flaws, pride, irrationality, cruelty with often shocking intensity.
Like Gulliver's Travels.
Exactly. On the surface, it looks like a fantastical adventure story, suitable for children. But underneath, it's a brutal critique of politics, science, human nature itself. And then there's a modest proposal.
The one suggesting eating babies.
Yes, a truly shocking, brilliant, horrifying piece of dark irony written to expose the appalling poverty in Ireland and the callous indifference of the authorities. Swift pushes satire to its absolute limit to provoke outrage and, hopefully, change.
Wow, okay. And the novel was still developing.
Absolutely. This Augustan age saw the early novel truly begin to take off and solidify its place as a popular form. Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, published in 1719, is often cited as a pioneering work.
The shipwreck story.
Right. It captivated readers with its incredibly detailed, seemingly factual account of survival, self-reliance, individualism, and practical ingenuity. It really reflected the burgeoning spirit of empiricism and the middle-class interest in realistic narratives. Defoe also wrote Moll Flanders, another realistic portrayal of a woman navigating a harsh society.
Okay, so we've had Restoration wit, Augustan satire. What's the last part of this neoclassical era?
The final phase is called the Age of Sensibility, running from about 1745 to 1785. And the name gives a clue.
Sensibility, like feelings.
Exactly. This was a crucial transitional period. It acts as a bridge between the strict rationality of the Augustans and the full-blown emotional intensity of the upcoming Romantic period. While reason was still deeply valued, there was a growing emphasis on emotion, sympathy, and sentimental experience, a subtle but significant shift toward exploring the inner life and the power of feeling.
So literature started getting more emotional.
Yes, Writers began to explore feelings, empathy, and what they saw as innate human goodness, often through highly emotional narratives designed to provoke tears and sympathy in the reader. This is sometimes called sentimentalism.
Any key examples?
Samuel Richardson's incredibly popular novel Pamela, or Virtue Rewarded, is a prime example. It's told through letters, an epistolary novel, and delves deeply into the inner emotional world of its virtuous servant heroine as she resists her master's advances. It focuses intensely on her feelings, her moral integrity, her suffering, and spark a huge interest in the psychology of characters and emotional response.
So a move towards emotion. Anything else happening in this age of sensibility?
Yes. A couple of other important currents. There was a burgeoning interest in things that weren't strictly rational or classical. A growing fascination with the medieval past, with ruins, with the supernatural, the mysterious elements of what would become Gothic literature.
Gothic, like spooky castles.
Pretty much. Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, published in 1764, is generally considered the first Gothic novel. It's full of mystery, terror, ancient curses, ghosts, damsels in distress, a deliberate move away from the clear light of reason towards the shadowy, the irrational, the sublime.
The sublime, what's that?
It's an aesthetic concept that becomes really important later for the Romantics. It refers to experiences that inspire awe, wonder, even a sense of terror, often related to vast, powerful nature like mountains or storms. It's a feeling beyond mere beauty, something overwhelming. This interest begins here.
Okay, so emotion, Gothic. Was there anyone still holding on to pure reason?
Oh, absolutely. The dominant literary figure of the later 18th century, almost acting as a kind of intellectual anchor amidst these shifting currents, was the monumental Samuel Johnson.
Dr. Johnson, the dictionary guy.
The very same. He was a brilliant critic, poet, essayist, moralist, and the formidable compiler of a dictionary of the English language. A truly Herculean effort that helped standardize English spelling and meaning. His novel Rasselas, his extensive critical writings like Lives of the Poets, his sharp conversational wit recorded by Boswell, he truly embodied the era's focus on logic, moral judgment, empirical observation, and clear, forceful prose. A steadfast bastion of reason, even as the tide was beginning to turn towards sensibility and emotion.
Which sets us up perfectly for the next big wave.
Prepare for a seismic shift in literary history, a profound cultural earthquake. We now hit the Romantic period, running from roughly 1785 up to about 1832.
Romanticism. We hear that word a lot. What does it really mean here?
It was a powerful, sweeping literary and cultural movement that erupted as a sharp, deliberate revolt against everything the Neoclassical period stood for, its emphasis on order, rationality, rules, and polite society.
So out with reason, in with?
Emotion, imagination, individualism, nature. Romantics didn't just react, they actively celebrated raw feeling, intense personal experience, the power of the individual spirit, and the sublime, often untamed beauty of the natural world. They were fueled, in part, by the revolutionary spirit blowing across the Atlantic in the Channel, the American and French revolutions.
Right, a time of upheaval. So what were the core beliefs, the tenets of Romanticism?
Several key ones that represent this profound reorientation. First and foremost, as you said, emotion over reason. When neoclassicists valued logic and intellect, Romantics passionately believed that feeling, intuition, instinct, even passion were the true sources of authentic understanding and morality.
Just your heart, not just your head.
Exactly. This led to incredibly intense emotional expression in their work, a deep, often highly personal, confessional exploration of subjective experience.
Yeah.
The heart reigned supreme.
And individualism.
Absolutely central. Romanticism pivoted inward. It focused on the rich, unique inner world of the individual. The artist was often portrayed as a solitary genius, a visionary whose personal perspective, whose unique voice was paramount. Originality was prized above conformity.
And imagination.
Imagination was elevated to an almost divine status. It wasn't just about making things up. It was seen as a powerful creative force, capable of perceiving deeper truths about reality, morality, and beauty than reason alone could grasp. Wordsworth called it the breath and finer spirit of all knowledge. This belief birthed a new kind of introspective poetry exploring personal feelings, memories, dreams, visions, even nightmares.
Okay, emotion, individualism, imagination, and nature. You mentioned nature.
Nature was huge for the Romantics. It was no longer just a pretty backdrop for human actions or a subject for scientific classification, as it often was for the neoclassicists. For Romantics, nature was seen as a living entity, almost divine in itself.
Like a spiritual force.
Precisely. A source of profound truth, spiritual solace, moral guidance, and endless inspiration. It was often starkly contrasted with the perceived corruption, artificiality, and dehumanizing effects of the burgeoning industrial cities. Poets like William Wordsworth saw nature as a great moral teacher, a refuge, a place where the human spirit could connect directly with the divine or some essential life force.
And you mentioned the sublime earlier. That fits in here.
Perfectly. The concept of the sublime became key for the Romantics' engagement with nature. Remember, it's not just about pretty landscapes. It's about experiences that evoke awe, wonder, even terror, usually from vast, powerful, uncontrollable natural phenomena.
Like huge mountains, wild storms.
Exactly. Towering, craggy peaks, raging storms at sea, immense waterfalls, the boundlessness of the ocean or the night sky. Confronting the sublime, Romantics believed, was a thrilling, almost spiritual experience. It allowed for a kind of transcendence, making you feel both tiny and insignificant, yet simultaneously connected to something vast and powerful, profoundly alive. It shook you out of the ordinary.
Okay, so this sounds like a really unified movement. Were all Romantics the same?
Not quite. It's often helpful to think of the Romantic poets, who were really central in terms of two distinct generations, each with a slightly different emphasis and style.
Two generations. Who were in the first?
The first generation is often associated with the older poets, sometimes called the Lake Poets, because several of them lived and worked in England's beautiful mountainous Lake District. They tended to focus on finding the extraordinary within the ordinary, the profound truths hidden in everyday life and the natural world around them.
And the big names here are...
William Wordsworth is arguably the central figure, the unofficial leader. He was revolutionary in his ideas about poetry. He advocated using simple, common language, the language really spoken by ordinary people, believing it could convey profound truths more effectively than artificial poetic diction.
Making poetry more accessible.
That was the goal. His huge autobiographical poem, The Prelude, is a monumental exploration of the growth of his own poetic mind, deeply connected to his experiences in nature. And the book he co-authored with Coleridge, Lyrical Ballads, published in 1798, is often considered the foundational text, the manifesto of English Romanticism. Its preface lays out their poetic principles.
What are some famous Wordsworth poems?
Poems like Tintern Abbey are classic Wordsworth, exploring the intricate connections between memory, the healing power of nature, and the way our relationship with the natural world changes over time. Or poems finding profound meaning in encounters with simple rural people, like Michael or the Solitary Reaper.
And Coleridge. Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
Wordsworth's close friend and collaborator. Coleridge was more the poet of the supernatural, the exotic, the dreamlike. He delves into the realms of the mysterious and the power of the imagination in a different way.
Like the Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Absolutely. His most famous poem, a haunting allegorical ballad filled with vivid supernatural imagery, exploring themes of guilt, punishment, redemption, and the interconnectedness of all living things. And then there's Kubla Khan.
The Unfinished Dream poem.
That's the one. Famously composed after an opium-induced dream, it's a fragment, but an incredibly vivid vision of a fantastical landscape. It speaks volumes about the creative power and perhaps the uncontrollable nature of imagination itself, delving into the darker, more mysterious aspects of the mind.
Okay, so Wordsworth and Coleridge are the first generation. Who's in the second?
The second generation of Romantic poets came slightly later. They tended to be more radical in their politics, more overtly rebellious against societal norms, and their lives were often as intense, passionate, and tragically short as their incandescent poetry.
Sounds dramatic. Who are we talking about?
The big three are Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and John Keats.
Byron, the celebrity poet.
Absolutely. George Gordon, Lord Byron, was a cultural phenomenon celebrated across Europe, yet notoriously scandalous. He practically invented the Byronic hero, that archetypal figure we still recognize. Moody, handsome, rebellious, brooding, charismatic, often haunted by some past sin, defiant against convention.
Found in his poem.
Embodied in poems like Childe Harold, Pilgrimage, which made him famous overnight. And his massive, unfinished satirical epic Don Juan brilliantly, wickedly skewers social hypocrisy, war, and conventional morality with dazzling wit and energy. He was a force of nature.
Okay, then Shelley.
Percy Bysshe Shelley. He was a radical idealist, an atheist, a passionate advocate for political freedom, social justice, and human perfectibility. His poetry is infused with this intense lyrical passion, this soaring belief in the power of the human spirit and poetry itself to change the world.
What are some key Shelley works?
Think of poems like Ode to the West Wind, where the wind becomes a symbol of revolutionary change sweeping through society, or Ozymandias, a powerful sonnet about the transience of power, or Adonis, his incredibly beautiful elegy for John Keats, which becomes a profound meditation on death, immortality, and the enduring power of art.
And Keats, you mentioned Shelley wrote an elegy for him.
Yes, John Keats, often seen as the poet of beauty and sensuousness. Tragically, he died of tuberculosis at just 25. But despite his incredibly short life, he produced some of the most exquisitely crafted, deeply felt poems in the English language.
What makes Keats special?
His poetry is incredibly rich in sensory detail sights, sounds, smells, tastes, textures. He explores themes of beauty, love, art, mortality, the relationship between joy and sorrow, often with a profound philosophical depth. Masterpieces like his great odes, Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode to a Nightingale, to Autumn, are just astonishing achievements, filled with unforgettable imagery and exploring the complexities of human experience with incredible maturity.
So poetry was clearly dominant. Were there any important novelists in the Romantic period?
Yes, definitely. While poetry was perhaps the defining genre, the novel continued to evolve. Sir Walter Scott was hugely important. He essentially pioneered the historical novel as we know it.
Like Ivanhoe, Knights and Castles.
Exactly. Ivanhoe, Waverley, Rob Roy. Scott blended meticulous historical research with romance, adventure, and vivid characters, bringing the past to life. His novels were massively popular across Europe and hugely influential, setting the stage for historical fiction throughout the 19th century. Well, there's Jane Austen. Though her novels were published during this period, her style is often seen as sitting slightly apart from high romanticism.
Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility.
Those ones. Austen offered a more restrained, witty, and sharply satirical view of provincial gentry life. Her focus is on social conventions, manners, courtship, and the subtle complexities of human relationships and moral choices, all rendered with brilliant irony and psychological insight. Less about wild nature, more about the drawing room.
And one more big one, Frankenstein.
Absolutely. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, published in 1818, a truly seminal work, often considered both romantic and Gothic. It powerfully explores themes central to the era: the dangers of unchecked ambition, scientific ambition in this case, the nature of humanity, isolation, and the consequences of playing God. It's a chilling, enduring warning about hubris and responsibility, resonating with anxieties about science and creation that feel very modern.
Okay, that's a lot to take in for Romanticism. What follows this intense period of emotion and individualism?
We move into another massive era, one defined by the long reign of a single monarch, the Victorian period. Named for Queen Victoria, whose reign stretched from 1837, though the literary period is often dated from the Reform Act of 1832 right up to her death in 1901.
Wow, that's a long time, almost 70 years.
An incredibly long and transformative period. This was a time of immense, often dizzying social, economic, and technological change for Britain. It was profoundly shaped by the relentless acceleration of the Industrial Revolution and the massive expansion of the British Empire across the globe.
So industry and empire are the backdrop.
Absolutely central. And Victorian literature directly grappled with the complexities and contradictions created by these huge forces. It served as both a vivid mirror reflecting this rapidly changing society, and very often as a powerful tool for moral and social commentary. Victorian writers were constantly asking, what does it mean to be modern? What is the cost of progress?
The Industrial Revolution must have had a huge impact. Factories, cities.
Transformed Britain in ways that were both exciting and terrifying. You saw the rapid, often chaotic growth of factories, the explosion of sprawling, overcrowded cities like London and Manchester. This created a new consumer culture, incredible wealth for some.
Also problems.
Huge problems. Immense social displacement as people moved from the countryside, widespread poverty, appalling working conditions, child labor, terrible urban squalor, and pollution. While a powerful, confident middle class emerged with its own set of values, this simultaneously widened the already stark divide between the enormously rich and the desperately poor.
And literature tackled this head-on.
Very much so. Especially the novel, which truly became the dominant literary form of the period, perfectly suited to exploring the intricate social fabric. This urgent need to depict the realities of the age gave rise to social realism. Writers sought to portray the complexities of modern life truthfully, often unflinchingly.
Focusing on those problems.
Yes, exploring themes like class struggle, poverty, the impact of industrialization, the challenges of urban life, the inequalities of the system. Charles Dickens, of course, is almost synonymous with this.
Begins. Oliver Twist, David Copperfield.
Exactly. He famously exposed social injustices and the plight of the urban poor in unforgettable, often sentimental but powerfully effective works. Oliver Twist revealed the horrors of the workhouse system. Hard Times was a searing critique of the dehumanizing effects of industrial capitalism and rigid utilitarian philosophy. Bleak House tackled the corruption and inefficiency of the legal system.
Were there others doing similar things?
Oh yes. A significant subgenre emerged called the Condition of England novel, which explicitly aimed to diagnose and address these pressing social problems. Novelists like Elizabeth Gaskell in Mary Barton or North and South provided incredibly detailed, often deeply sympathetic portraits of working-class life, particularly in the industrial North, exploring strikes, poverty, and the human cost of progress.
Anyone else? George Eliot.
George Eliot, the pen name of Marianne Evans, was another giant. In novels like Middlemarch, often considered one of the greatest novels in English, she offered profound psychological and social studies of provincial life. She delved into the intricate web of relationships, moral choices, idealism, disappointment, and social constraints affecting ordinary people caught in this changing world. Incredible depth and realism.
So realism was key. What were other defining characteristics of Victorian literature?
Beyond realism, there was often a strong moral and didactic purpose.
Didactic, meaning?
Meaning intended to teach or instruct. Victorian literature often aimed to reinforce core values perceived as essential for social stability and individual virtue. Hard work, duty, piety, self-help, respectability, the sanctity of the family. Novels frequently presented characters navigating complex moral challenges, facing temptations, and ultimately, often striving towards a virtuous resolution or learning an important lesson.
Literature as a moral guide.
To a large extent, yes, reflecting the era's earnestness and anxieties about social cohesion. Also, structurally, these were often very long, complex narratives.
The famous Victorian triple-decker novels.
Exactly. Perfectly suited for serialization. Many novels were first published in monthly or weekly installments in magazines. This allowed for intricate, sprawling plots with multiple subplots, huge casts of characters covering different social strata, and cliffhanger endings to keep readers hooked.
Like a Victorian TV series.
Kind of. It even allowed writers to gauge reader reaction and sometimes adapt the story as they went along. It made reading a shared communal event, with families eagerly awaiting the next installment.
Okay, so social realism, moral purpose, long narratives. Did they also explore inner life, like the Romantics?
Yes, absolutely. Beyond the broad social canvas, Victorian writers also pioneered deeper explorations of individual psychology and inner life, often with great intensity. The Bronte sisters are prime examples here.
Charlotte and Emily.
Right. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre was groundbreaking. It's a passionate first-person account of a young woman's struggle for independence, self-respect, intellectual and spiritual fulfillment, pushing against the rigid constraints placed on women. Incredible psychological intensity.
And Wuthering Heights.
Emily Bronte's only novel, Wuthering Heights, is something else entirely. Wild, elemental, deeply unconventional. It delves into intense, almost supernatural passions, revenge, and the raw, untamed forces of human nature, set against the stark Yorkshire moors. A powerful contrast to the more socially grounded realism of Dickens or Eliot.
So the novel was king. What about Victorian poetry?
Poetry was still very important and widely read, but it often took on a more introspective, sometimes troubled tone, frequently reflecting a palpable crisis of faith that gripped the era.
A crisis of faith. Why?
Several factors. Rapid scientific advancements, particularly Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, published On the Origin of Species in 1859, seemed to challenge the biblical account of creation and humanity's special place in the universe. New forms of biblical scholarship also questioned the literal truth of Scripture. This created widespread spiritual doubt, anxiety, and a sense of uncertainty.
And the poets wrote about this.
Very much so. Alfred, Lord Tennyson, the poet laureate for much of the period, grappled profoundly with grief, loss, doubt, and the search for meaning in a world increasingly shaped by science. It was monumental elegy. In memoriam, A.H.H. Matthew Arnold's poetry, like the famous Dover Beach, eloquently expressed feelings of spiritual isolation, melancholy, and the loss of a comforting, unifying faith, hearing only the melancholy, long withdrawing roar of the sea of faith.
Sounds quite somber.
It often was. There was also Robert Browning, famous for his dramatic monologues exploring complex psychological portraits and moral ambiguities through the voices of historical or fictional characters. And his wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, was hugely popular, especially for her sonnets from the Portuguese.
Okay, so as this long century wore on, did new movements emerge towards the end?
Yes, a couple of significant movements emerged, reacting against or extending certain aspects of the mainstream Victorian ethos. First, the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood.
Pre-Raphaelite, meaning before Raphael, the painter.
Exactly. This was a group of painters and poets who rejected what they saw as the ugliness, materialism, and artistic conventions of the Industrial Age and Victorian art. They looked back for inspiration to medieval art before the Renaissance master Raphael, seeking what they perceived as its purity, simplicity, intense detail, and spiritual sincerity.
Who were the poets?
The central figure was Dante Gabriel Rossetti, also painter. His sister, Christina Rossetti, was also a major poet associated with the movement. Their poetry is often highly symbolic, mystical, sensuous, filled with vivid imagery, medieval themes, and sometimes a kind of languid, melancholic beauty.
And the other movement?
Towards the very end of the century, aestheticism emerged. This championed the radical slogan, art for art's sake.
Art just for beauty, not for morals.
Precisely. It was a conscious rejection of the strong moralizing or didactic purpose that had characterized so much earlier Victorian art and literature, led by the brilliant, flamboyant playwright and personality Oscar Wilde.
Wilde. The importance of being earnest.
That's him. And his novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, is a key text of aestheticism. The movement focused on beauty, wit, paradox, style, and the cultivation of sensory experience as ends in themselves, deliberately pushing against utilitarian values and conventional morality. It was a defiant stance, celebrating artistry above all else, paving the way for modernism.
Which is where we're headed next, the modern period. Sounds like another big shift.
A truly radical break. We're now stepping into the modern period, roughly spanning from the cataclysmic start of World War I in 1914 up to the devastating end of World War II in 1945. Though its roots go back earlier, this era saw a revolutionary wave in the arts. Modernist writers consciously, deliberately shattered the traditions of the past, Victorian realism, romantic sentimentality.
Why the break? What drove it?
A profound feeling, a conviction, really, among many artists and intellectuals, that the old forms, the old ways of representing the world were simply no longer adequate. They couldn't capture the fragmented, disorienting, psychologically complex, often terrifying reality of the 20th century they were living through. A new, broken world seemed to demand entirely new forms of expression.
What were the big influences shaping this new reality?
Several huge ones converged. First, and perhaps most profoundly, World War I. The sheer scale of its destruction, the industrialized slaughter in the trenches, the horrific loss of life, it utterly shattered deeply held 19th century beliefs in progress, civilization, reason, and inherent human goodness.
The war to end all wars ended idealism instead.
In many ways, yes. It led to pervasive disillusionment, cynicism, a deep skepticism towards authority, and a fundamental questioning of all established values, political, moral, religious, social. The world felt broken, chaotic, meaningless to many. Literature had to reflect that profound rupture.
Any other major influences? Psychology?
Absolutely. The burgeoning field of psychoanalysis, particularly Sigmund Freud's groundbreaking theories about the unconscious mind, repressed desires, dreams, the power of irrational drives, this had a massive impact.
How did it affect writing?
Writers began to explore the hidden motivations, the complex inner life, the often contradictory impulses of their characters in entirely new ways. They recognized that conscious thought was just the tip of the iceberg. This led to narratives focusing much more on interiority, subjective experience, and psychological depth, often revealing the irrationality lurking beneath the surface of respectable life.
What about science and philosophy?
Huge impacts there, too. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, emerging in the early 20th century, fundamentally challenged the old Newtonian physics and the very notion of absolute time, space, and objective reality. It suggested that perspective, the observer's position, mattered. Truth might be relative, fragmented.
And philosophy, Nietzsche.
Friedrich Nietzsche's provocative ideas from the late 19th century gained wider currency. His declaration of the death of God, his critique of traditional morality, his emphasis on individual will, these contributed to a profound crisis of meaning, a sense of moral relativism, a feeling that the old certainties were gone. All these intellectual currents created a climate of uncertainty, fragmentation, and a questioning of stable reality that permeated the arts.
So if the world felt fragmented and uncertain, how did they write about it? What changed in literary form?
They responded with radical experimentation. Modernist writers consciously rejected the conventions they inherited: smooth, linear narratives, reliable, omniscient narrators, traditional rhyme schemes and metrical patterns, clear plots with neat resolutions. They saw these as false, inadequate to represent the chaos and complexity they perceived.
So what did they do instead?
They experimented boldly. Techniques like stream of consciousness became central, attempting to capture the messy, associative, unfiltered flow of a character's thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, moment by moment. Think of reading someone's mind, unfiltered.
Sounds challenging to read.
It can be. They also used fragmented narratives, jumping between different times, places, perspectives. Multiple, often unreliable narrators became common, forcing the reader to piece things together. Their rallying cry, famously articulated by Ezra Pound, was often, "Make it new, break from the past." Another principle was show don't tell, presenting experience directly, through images and sensory details, rather than explaining it, inviting the reader to actively interpret and construct meaning from these often disparate pieces.
You mentioned Ezra Pound. Was symbolism important too?
Hugely important, and illusion. Modernist works are often incredibly dense, with references to classical myths, to history, to the Bible, to earlier literature, to contemporary events. They use complex, often private or ambiguous, symbolism to convey themes and ideas indirectly.
Why indirectly?
Perhaps because direct statements felt inadequate or impossible in a world where shared meanings and clear truths seem to have collapsed. Symbol and illusion allowed for multiple layers of meaning, ambiguity, intellectual complexity. It's that idea again. If the world felt shattered, maybe literature could only respond by mirroring that fragmentation, using these echoes and fragments to try and build some kind of new provisional meaning out of the ruins.
Okay, this sounds revolutionary. Who are the key figures putting these ideas into practice?
This period gave us some of the most influential and, yes, often challenging writers in the English language, authors who totally reshaped literary possibilities. T.S. Eliot is absolutely central.
Eliot, The Wasteland.
The Wasteland, published in 1922, is arguably the defining poem of high modernism. Its fragmented structure, its shifting voices and languages, its dense tapestry of illusions, its overwhelming sense of spiritual and cultural sterility, it perfectly captured the disillusionment and exhaustion of the post-WWI era, a landmark work. Eliot's other poems, like The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, also explored themes of alienation, paralysis, and the difficulty of communication in the modern world.
Who else? Virginia Woolf.
Virginia Woolf, definitely. A key figure of the influential Bloomsbury group of intellectuals and artists, and a true master of stream of consciousness. In novels like Mrs. Dalloway, which captures the inner life of its title character over a single day in London.
Right, contrasting her thoughts with the external world.
Exactly. And To the Lighthouse, which explores time, memory, loss, and the nature of perception within a family setting over many years. Compressed through inner monologue, she delved into the fleeting thoughts, sensations, memories, the luminous halo of consciousness with incredible subtlety and poeticism.
And the really challenging one, James Joyce.
James Joyce, often considered one of the most innovative, radical, and, yes, let's be honest, demanding modernists. An Irish writer who pushed experimentation to its limits. His masterpiece, Ulysses, also published in 1922.
Another 1922 landmark.
A huge year for modernism. Ulysses chronicles the events of a single day, June 16, 1904, now celebrated as Bloomsday, in the lives of Leopold Bloom and Stephen Dedalus in Dublin. But it does so using an absolutely dazzling, overwhelming array of literary styles, parodies, puns, allusions, stream of consciousness techniques. It maps Homer's Odyssey onto modern Dublin. It's an unprecedented feat of narrative virtuosity that fundamentally expanded our understanding of what a novel could do.
Sounds like a book you need a guide for.
Many readers find one helpful. Joyce's earlier work, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, is also key, tracing Stephen Dedalus's intellectual and spiritual development. And his final work, Finnegan's Wake, is even more linguistically experimental and notoriously difficult.
Okay, Eliot, Woolf, Joyce. Any other major poet? Yeats.
W.B. Yeats, another brilliant Irish writer. He had a long career that started in the late 19th century with a more romantic Celtic twilight style, influenced by Irish myth and folklore. But his later poetry became distinctly modernist.
How did it change?
It became harder, more symbolic, more engaged with the political turmoil and violence of his time, particularly the struggle for Irish independence. Poems like The Second Coming, with its terrifying vision of chaos and the loss of center, or Sailing to Byzantium, exploring art and immortality, use powerful, stark, unforgettable language and complex symbolism to grapple with historical change and personal meaning. A fascinating evolution.
What about D.H. Lawrence? Where does he fit?
D.H. Lawrence is another major figure, though sometimes seen as slightly distinct from the high modernists like Eliot or Woolf. His novels like Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, Women in Love, and the controversial Lady Chatterley's Lover focused intensely on the psychological, emotional, and often suppressed sexual lives of his characters.
More focus on instinct and the body.
Very much so. He often portrayed modern industrial society and its rigid social conventions as deadening, stifling natural human vitality and connection. He explored themes of class, alienation, the conflict between instinct and intellect, often with great psychological intensity and sometimes a prophetic, almost mystical tone.
And Ezra Pound, you mentioned him earlier.
Ezra Pound was crucial, not just as a poet, but as a kind of catalyst and editor for modernism. A central figure in the early Imagist movement, which advocated for poetry built on clear, precise, concrete images, direct treatment of the thing, as he put it. He famously championed and edited Eliot's The Wasteland. His own major lifelong work, the Cantos, is a vast, sprawling, incredibly complex and controversial epic, reflecting his evolving, often problematic ideas about history, economics, and culture. His motto, "Make it new," captured the modernist impulse perfectly.
One more name often mentioned is E.M. Forster.
E.M. Forster. Yes, he's often seen as a transitional figure, bridging the gap between the realism of the Edwardian era, just before WWI, and the bolder experiments of high modernism. His novels, like Howard's End, A Room with a View, and especially A Passage to India.
The one about British rule in India.
That's the one. They explored themes of social class, personal relationships, cultural clashes, particularly the difficulties of connection across social and cultural divides. "Only connect," is his famous phrase. While not as formally experimental as Joyce or Woolf, his work offered sharp social commentary and deep psychological insight into the tensions of his time, particularly concerning the British Empire.
So modernism sounds like a response to a world falling apart, trying to find new ways to make sense of it. What happens after World War II? Does that change things again?
It certainly does. We've journeyed through these radical breaks, these conscious reinterpretations, and now we arrive at our final stop for today, the postmodern period. This roughly stretches from the end of World War II, say 1945, right up to the present day, though its endpoint is definitely debated.
Postmodern. After modernism. Is it similar or different?
It's complex. It's often seen as both a reaction against certain aspects of modernism and also an extension of others. It's a slippery term, and there's a lot of debate about what exactly it means and whether we're still in it.
Okay, so what's the general idea? If modernists were trying to find new meaning in chaos?
Postmodernists are often characterized by a deeper, more pervasive skepticism. They tend to be deeply suspicious of absolute truth, objective reality, universal values, and especially those grand narratives or master narratives, overarching stories like religion or science or Marxism that claim to provide a total explanation for history and human experience.
So even more questioning than the modernists.
In some ways, yes. Less searching for a hidden order, perhaps, and more accepting of, or even playing with, surface, fragmentation, and contradiction. It's an era often defined by irony, playfulness, and a questioning of everything, including the nature of storytelling itself.
Playfulness. How does that show up? What are the characteristics?
Several key features often pop up in postmodern literature and art. One is pastiche.
Pastiche. Like collage.
Sort of. It's the mixing and borrowing of styles, genres, motifs from vastly different periods and cultural levels, often without any sense of hierarchy or parody. You might find high art references bumping up against pop culture cliches, sci-fi tropes mixed with historical settings, all coexisting within a single work. It playfully blurs boundaries between high and low culture.
Okay, what else?
Metafiction is huge.
Metafiction. Fiction about fiction.
Exactly. Postmodern writers frequently and very self-consciously draw attention to the fact that their work is a work of fiction, an artificial construct. They break the illusion of reality.
How?
Maybe the narrator directly addresses the reader. Maybe characters realize they're in a novel. Maybe the author includes footnotes commenting on the story or discusses the process of writing within the text itself. It's a constant reminder. This is not real life. This is a story being told, questioning the relationship between fiction and reality.
Interesting. What about time and plot? Still fragmented?
Often, even more so than in modernism. Temporal distortion is common. Postmodern narratives frequently abandon linear chronology altogether. They might jump around wildly in time, repeat events with variations, offer multiple contradictory endings, or blur the lines between past, present, and future. This can reflect a sense of historical disarray, the unreliability of memory, or the idea that history itself is just another story we tell.
And you mentioned intertextuality earlier. Is that postmodern too?
Very much so. It's the idea that works of literature are in constant dialogue with each other. Postmodern texts are often filled with explicit references, quotations, parodies, or rewritings of earlier texts. It suggests that no text is truly original, that all writing is part of a vast, interconnected web of pre-existing language and stories. It challenges traditional notions of authorship and originality, like a giant cultural conversation.
And underneath all this playfulness, skepticism.
A deep, pervasive questioning of authority. Whether it's the authority of the author, the authority of traditional narratives, the authority of political or scientific institutions, or the very authority of language to represent reality accurately. This skepticism is frequently expressed through irony, black humor, parody, and a general spirit of debunking or deconstruction.
It sounds like it forces you, the reader, to really think about how stories work and what truth even means.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is how this persistent questioning pushes us to reconsider what truth signifies in storytelling, whether objective truth is attainable or even desirable, and how narratives shape our understanding of the world.
Okay, so who are the key writers associated with postmodernism?
It's a diverse group spanning different countries. Samuel Beckett, the Irish playwright, is often seen as a crucial bridging figure. His play, Waiting for Godot, with its minimalist stage circular plot and exploration of meaninglessness and waiting in an absurd universe, really embodies that transition from late modernism to postmodern sensibilities.
Who else? Borges.
Jorge Luis Borges, the brilliant Argentine writer. Though mostly writing short stories and essays, his influence was immense. His philosophical fictions are full of labyrinths, infinite libraries, mirrors, paradoxes, parallel universes, meticulously crafted intellectual puzzles designed to question the nature of reality, identity, knowledge, and narrative itself. He blurred the lines between philosophy, fantasy, and fiction in groundbreaking ways.
What about American writers?
Pynchon, Thomas Pynchon, yes, a master of the sprawling maximalist postmodern epic. Novels like Gravity's Rainbow or V are legendary for their immense complexity, vast casts of characters, encyclopedic range of knowledge from rocket science to obscure pop culture, paranoia, intricate conspiracies, and a dizzying blend of high seriousness and low comedy. His work often explores themes of entropy, technology, and the hidden systems, maybe sinister, maybe random, that seem to govern modern life. Challenging, but influential.
Any others? Rushdie.
Salman Rushdie is another key figure. His works, like the Booker Prize-winning Midnight's Children, are prime examples of magical realism, a technique often associated with postmodernism, particularly in post-colonial contexts. He blends realistic historical settings, like India's independence, with fantastical elements, surreal events, and exuberant language to explore themes of identity, cultural hybridity, history, and the power of storytelling itself, showing how the fantastical can illuminate the complexities of the real.
And Doris Lessing, she won the Nobel Prize.
Doris Lessing indeed. While her earlier work was more realist, her later novels, particularly her science fiction series Socrates and Argos, are often considered postmodern. They use allegorical, speculative frameworks to explore complex social systems, political structures, consciousness, gender, and the sweep of human history on a grand, often challenging scale, pushing the boundaries of conventional narrative.
Okay, so postmodernism seems like it covers a lot right up to today. But you said its end is debated.
Very much so. The big debate now is, are we still in the postmodern period or have we moved beyond it? Many critics and writers argue that we've entered a new phase, sometimes tentatively called postmodernism, or perhaps metamodernism.
What would that look like?
The idea is that maybe there's a move away from pure irony and skepticism towards a new kind of sensibility, one that tries to balance postmodern awareness, the irony, the self-consciousness, the acceptance of fragmentation, with a renewed, perhaps cautious, sense of earnestness, sincerity, hope, or a desire for connection and reconstruction. Maybe oscillating between irony and sincerity, knowingness and yearning. It's still very much being defined.
But postmodernism's influence is still felt.
Oh, undeniably. Its legacy, the pervasive irony, the self-reference, the genre bending, the questioning of grand narratives, the blurring of high and low culture remains incredibly strong in contemporary literature, film, television, music, art, even how we talk online. It continues to raise important, often uncomfortable questions about how we tell stories, how we perceive our world, and how we grapple with knowledge and truth in this hyper-connected yet often deeply disorienting digital age. Its impact ensures it continues to shape our cultural conversations even if we're moving into something new.
Wow, okay. We have covered an incredible amount of ground. Just wow. Over 1,500 years of English literature.
It's quite a journey, isn't it?
From the heroic chants of Beowulf echoing in a mead hall, through the epic scope of Milton's Paradise Lost, the sharp wit of Pope and Swift, the passionate outpourings of Wordsworth and Keats, the vast social canvases of Dickens and Eliot, the fractured consciousness of Woolf and Joyce, right up to the mind-bending, self-aware narratives of Pynchon and Borges.
We've seen the language itself transform almost unrecognizably. We've seen societal values, religious beliefs, philosophical outlooks shift dramatically from one era to the next.
And through it all, authors constantly pushing the boundaries, finding new ways to express what it means to be human in their particular time and place. You really get the sense that literature isn't just, entertainment sitting on a shelf.
Not at all. It's a living record, a dynamic conversation across centuries, reflecting, shaping, questioning human thought and experience. It evolves with every historical tremor, every technological leap, every profound shift in how we understand ourselves and the world.
So this deep dive hopefully has given you, our listener, more than just facts.
We hope it's giving you a kind of roadmap, a framework. We've tried to highlight the key figures, outline the defining characteristics of each major period, and maybe show some of the connections how one era often builds upon or reacts violently against or subtly transforms the one that came before it.
So now, maybe when you pick up a book from one of these periods, you have a better sense of the why behind the what, the context, the concerns, the techniques.
Exactly, a foundational understanding that hopefully equips you to explore further on your own, to appreciate the intricate connections across this vast literary landscape, and maybe even to discover new favorites along the way.
Okay, so before we wrap up, that final provocative thought. With all of this incredible, evolving saga of English literature laid out behind us, what does it all mean for the stories being written today, right now, in this moment?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
If each period we've discussed has been, in some way, a unique response to its preceding era and the specific pressures and possibilities of its contemporary world, what challenges, what anxieties, what new technologies, what cultural shifts, what revelations might be shaping the next great literary movement? What forms will it take?
And perhaps just as importantly, how will you, the reader, the listener, engage with it?
Yeah.
How will you connect with the stories yet to be told? And how will you make sense of it all as this incredible literary journey inevitably continues into the future?
Something to think about.